Welcome to the Inner West Library Speaker Series. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal and Wongal people of the Aurora Nation on which this podcast is produced and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging from across all lands this podcast reaches. Sally Thorne is the USA Today Bestselling author of the Office rom-com The Hating Game 2016 and 99% Mine 2019. The Hating Game was named in the top 20 romance novels of 2016 by the Washington Post and was a top 10 finalist in the Goodreads Choice Awards romance category. It has been cited as a book that has reinvigorated the romantic comedy genre. Production of the film adaptation starring Lucy Howe and Austin Stowell began on November 21st, 2020. Sally's much anticipated second novel, 99% Mine, was released in January 2019 by William Morrow Books. It debuted on the USA Today Bestseller list and was featured by Goodreads as one of the top 28 hit books for the first half of 2019. Sally has signed another 2-book contract and is currently working on book 3, Second First Impressions, which comes out in April 2021. Sally Thorne lives in Canberra, Australia, and spends her days writing, reading, drinking cups of tea, and obeying the every whim of Delia the Pug and her paint quarter horse Louie. She lives with her husband in a house filled with vintage toys, too many cushions, and a haunted dollhouse. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.
It's an absolute pleasure. We are very delighted to be chatting today.
Oh, thank you.
Sally, my first question. 2020 has been a trying year for people all around the world, full of lockdowns, quarantines, and uncertainty. During this time, more than ever, people have turned to film, television, and of course, books for support, comfort, and escapism. What has this year been like for you as a creator?
Well, I don't think it will be any surprise to you to hear that 2020 has been a challenging year to be a creator. I should say that I don't feel like I have too much to complain about because Canberra has weathered COVID-19 pretty well. But I started this year dealing with a different problem. Canberra was having some bushfires coming very close to us and very close to my house. I could see from our suburb, the flames getting closer. And there was one day where we packed our car with all of our essential, irreplaceable things and left the suburb. And I had to evacuate my horse. And so it was unbelievably stressful. And it wasn't a great place to start the year. You know, I wasn't feeling very creative at that time, as you can imagine. So I would say that the year didn't start off great. And then it sort of seamlessly segued into COVID and the stay-at-home lockdown situation. And I guess in a sense, things weren't too different for me. I work full-time now as a writer and I spend all of my time by myself at home. But I think what changed for me was that I no longer had the option to go out and catch up with friends or go on people watch at the local stores, or do those kind of things that I think are really important to replenish yourself as a creative person. I always get a lot of ideas just from talking to people and listening to other people's conversations and the way that they talk. And I couldn't do any of that. And I was also really stressed out because we didn't understand what this virus was. And so I was getting back from doing my grocery shopping, like dripping with sweat because I was so stressed out. But I would say that I've coped because I've got a really great publisher who they understood that I think this is one of the first times when, as an entire globe of people, we're all kind of in the same boat. Boats are different sizes and we are weathering this in different ways, but my publisher has always been very supportive and let me take the time that I need. Yeah.
That's really great to hear. It has been really hard because, the fires, which we were watching it from TV and they were really scary. And then once we had that, then we had COVID, and like you said, nobody knew what was going on. So it's been hard for so many people, but luckily you're safe and you've got that support. So that's really good.
I think another important thing was that I've made some good friends who are also authors. I would recommend if you are if you are listening and you want to be a writer or you are a writer, it's really important to make friends with other writers because they're the only ones who can get this. This is a really unusual job, a really hard job, and you need to be able to send a message to someone and complain to them, oh, I didn't get any words today, or, you just need someone else who's creative, who understands what you're going through. So if you are a writer and you can attend, conventions, one day in the distant future when that sort of thing is possible, I would really recommend trying to make some connections, or even just get a writing buddy. If you, if you're not anywhere near being published, just find a writing buddy, preferably someone local that you could meet up with, and you guys can sort of sit down and talk about your imaginary worlds. I think it's really important to do that.
That's very good advice. Very excellent advice. Now we start the fun questions, Sally.
Okay.
Your books are constantly flying off the shelves here at Inner West Libraries, and our readers would love to know, how do you think Josh and Lucy from The Hating Game and Darcy and Tom from 99% Mine would have coped with lockdown?
Great question. I think I can imagine Josh and Lucy from The Hating Game. I can imagine them very efficiently setting up their own workspaces within their apartment. And I think they're both pretty professional people. I think they would have just continued on working, even if they were on top of each other a little bit in a small space. And
is this where you're going to define the sentence "top of each other"?
I think that this is a family program, isn't it? And I think, for Darcy and Tom, I think things definitely would be a little bit more adult rated. I think Darcy probably would keep Tom in bed for a lot of the time, and he would have to he'd have to lever himself out however he could to try to get some more of his work done in whatever house they're currently working on together. But I think both of the sets of couples would deal with it okay, because that's an aspect of my writing that repeats. I really do best when I'm writing about two people in one room. So forced proximity is, I think, probably always going to be an element that will be in most of my writing. And I mean, what is a lockdown? It's forced proximity, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see what books come out of this in the future, not just from me, but from other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a very fun question.
Author Emily Henry recently described your writing as the epitome of all things warm, sweet, relaxing and cozy, and said that she wanted to live in a world where she woke up to a new Sally Thorne book every day. Same here. How would you describe your own style, and can you tell us a little about what shaped you as a writer?
Okay, well, that is very sweet of Emily to say. She is lovely. And if she woke up to a new Sally Thorne book every day, I think Sally Thorne would be dead.
Oh, no.
In no time at all, because it seems to take me about 18 months to write a book. She could have a very short book every day. I always enjoyed writing, even when I was a child. I had a really great primary school teacher in year 6 called Mrs. Rowley, and she always encouraged us to do creative writing. We always used to have a quiet time where we would do creative writing, and she always called on me first to read out what I'd written, and it was just a real rush because I was obsessed with Mrs. Rowley. I loved her so much that I was jealous of her daughter.
Oh, really?
I know, I loved her. She was amazing. And I actually met up with Mrs. Rowley after I published The Hating Game. And we had a coffee, and I said, basically, I don't think I would have written The Hating Game if there hadn't have been you. And she was, she was really surprised. But I think it's true. Like, really early experiences like that can shape what you believe that you're good at and what you are interested in doing. So it was a real privilege to be able to give her a signed copy. And yep, still totally jealous of her daughter. I'll be her honorary daughter if she'll have me. And I really think that was very influential. I loved writing all the way through high school, and then when you're at school, you start to get really sick of being in front of the computer and writing because you're forced to write essays and things like that. And all through my 20s, I didn't write anything. I was just trying to get through a succession of pretty crappy office jobs. And I think it was about 2009, I found Twilight. And Twilight's very influential for many romance authors. You know, I hadn't been obsessed with a book in like, you know, more than 10 years probably. So I found Twilight, and a friend at work, Kate, who was reading it at the same time. So we suddenly had this thing that we could talk about together. Then I found that there was something called fan fiction, which I had never heard of. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know what fan fiction is, it is a huge online world where people rewrite parts of TV shows and movies and books that in the way that they wish that it had gone. So they will take the original characters and they will put them in any and every situation that they can. It's huge. It's a really big community. I did a short writing course around that time because I was really looking for a cheap hobby. I wanted something that I could do just after work that didn't cost a lot of money. I already had a laptop, so I took a short course about creative writing, and I met my writing buddy in that class. Remember I was talking about that earlier? It's important to find a buddy. And I started writing fan fiction because I figured that it was a good way to get some feedback online on my writing style. And I started writing Twilight fan fiction. It's still online somewhere out there. And it was amazing. Within 20 minutes of posting a chapter, you would get a notification that you'd received a review. And it was really instant feedback. And I really quickly honed in on what romance readers like to read. They like to read the two characters on the same page. That's what they like. They like it if it's intense. They like it if there's some kissing. They don't like it if the characters are off the same page and not thinking about each other. So getting this instant feedback, I think it really honed my sort of my instincts on how to write and what people liked. And I also made some good friends who were also writing at the same time. So I met Lauren Billings and Christina Hobbs, who now write as Christina Lauren. They were writing fan fiction at the same time as me. A lot of very big name authors who are published today were writing in the Twilight fan fiction universe at that time. So, for example, E.L. James, who is now the author of 50 Shades of Grey, she was writing at that time. I could give you a list, you know, as long as my arm of people who are now published. And Christina and Lauren were one of those connections that proved to be really fortuitous and important for me later down the line, because they'd said to me, we love your voice in your writing. If you ever write anything original, as in to say, you know, with your own characters, let us know, because we have an agent now and we'll pass it on.
That's amazing. Like you, I didn't know much about fan fiction. One of my colleagues at work, she educated me on fan fiction. But it's amazing that, like what the names that you've just mentioned, so many of them are now successfully published authors because they started off like that. It's just amazing. It's hard to get my head around it sometimes, but it's amazing.
It is. It really, Christina and Lauren call it fan fiction boot camp. We all sort of were writing in that same period where we were basically writing just out of a spirit of generosity, because you don't get paid for fan fiction, but we were writing huge amounts of words. My fan fiction ended up being, I think, 140,000 words long, which if that was a book, that would be like a 3-inch thick book.
Oh, wow.
And we would upload it. I was also not writing ahead, so I would just write the chapter and upload it. So then if I'd written myself into a corner, I couldn't go back and edit anything. I was just trying to build on my last chapter. It was just really writing on your feet and just really wanting that instant feedback. It was really great. And I think it really shaped my style because I learned what I liked to write. I learned what people liked. And I think you can still tell maybe when someone has written fan fiction. If you're reading a book where the writer really lets the moment sit in a romance and lets you feel what it is like to be in that room with that person. And another writer might sort of move on from that moment, but a fan fiction writer knows that that's what the reader loves. And that's the moment that the reader will also want to return and reread after they've had a really bad day.
Yes.
So I think that there is a certain sort of really luscious, slightly self-indulgent, really intense, really emotion and sensory-driven writing that how I aim to write. So that's how I came to be. That was a long story. We started off when I was 12 years old, and now here I am on the podcast.
Well, we're very happy that you're here. Believe me, all your readers are. All your readers are. Now, one of my favourite things about your characters is how vivid they are and how beautiful vulnerability you bring to them. Joshua's shyness that he masks behind his temper, Lucy's loneliness and fear that she'll never live up to her parents' high expectations, Tom's endless search to repay and fit in with the family that took him in and never feeling good enough. Can you talk us through your character building process and how you find their voice?
Okay, it's not easy for starters. It doesn't turn out perfectly first try. I'm learning as I'm repeating each process of writing a book that it does take time and it takes layers. So I think a lot of first-time writers who are working on something, they feel frustrated because it doesn't look on the page how it looks in their head. That is normal. And that is why once you've finished your first draft, that is only the very, very beginning of the process. You've only just left the train station once you've finished your first draft. And so I have learned to just understand that process and just build on it layer by layer. So the first draft, they'll look like cardboard cutouts pretty much. Then you start to mainly hone them by working on the dialogue. So working out how people talk. Everybody speaks in a different way and everybody reveals things about themselves in the things that they say and the way that they say them.
Yeah.
So dialogue is a really good way to differentiate your characters. If you've done it well enough, the reader should really know who is speaking just by the dialogue. Even if there was no tags, like a he said or she said, they should still be able to feel who is speaking. So that's what you're really going for.
Yeah.
And so it's just layer by layer. And for example, in the hating game, everybody loves that Lucy grew up in a strawberry farm. And that is something that has become really synonymous with the hating game, a strawberry. People still will take a photo of a nice punnet of strawberries that they've seen at the market and they will send it to me in a message. Hi, Sally, thought of you. I never anticipated that. But see, that was a fairly late addition to the book. I realized that I just really wanted something unique in Lucy's past that kind of just colors her in a little bit more and makes her just a different person to every other person. I'd once been to a strawberry farm and gone strawberry picking, and I thought it was completely magical. And so just by using that experience from my own past, I weaved in fairly easily that that was where she grew up, on a strawberry farm. And from that, it just has become part of her. And the fact that Joshua is so desperate to know her that he's even looked up the directions on how to get to her strawberry farm where she grew up. For me, that's very romantic. And so that's just an example of how you can use just like a small thing from your past, something you love, something that you collect. What is it that makes anybody who they are? It's usually the things that they love to do in their spare time, the things that they do when no one else is around. You need to just start to collect and cherry pick little things. And like I said earlier, I listen a lot to how people talk. I'm the person in the conversation that will be listening. and filing, not necessarily filing things away, because I don't base things on
Yeah.
people I know. I don't want anyone to freak
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's
you're listening, but you're trying to keep quiet at the same time because you want to see how people talk and,
yeah, exactly.
people
Yeah.
watching. It's great.
People watching, I
Yeah.
just find it very interesting. And I also make up a lot of stories and narratives in my own head. So I will do something like, I will hear one line of conversation between two colleagues in a restaurant. You know, they'll say something really out of context to each other. And then in my mind, I'll sit there and I'll imagine what that meant and what is going on out in the kitchen in the restaurant. So I'm always imagining and sort of creating little stories and narratives for myself, and giving things a personality. You said I at the start that I collect a lot of vintage toys, so
Yeah.
you know, a lot of them have a character and a backstory as well. It's just, you know, some people are just this way, and that's how I am.
And there's so many people that's still looking for Josh out there in the real world. You know that?
Well, you know what? There's plenty of people out there that are not what they first appear to be. So maybe some people just need a little bit more patience to
That's right.
work out who they are underneath the surface.
That's absolutely right. I'll have to say that to the next person who says, "Where can I find Josh?" And I'll have to say to them, you have to be a little bit more patient.
Well, out of the two, I would always take Tom. Tom, for me, Tom Valeska is husband material through and through. He's just a thoroughly, deeply good person. And for me, maybe as I'm getting a little older, I think I would always take the Tom
Take the Tom.
over the snarky Josh. Yeah. So that's just me, though.
Oh dear, I'm having so much fun. This is bad. Sally, one of the most powerful things about your books is the relationships you build between characters. You explore complicated family dynamics, including the added layer of twin sibling rivalry, friendships, and beautiful romantic partnerships. How much world building planning do you do before you start, or does this all just come out as you write?
I don't do a lot of planning. I wish that I did. I once did outline a full novel, but I couldn't get started on it because I felt too bored with it. I felt like I already knew how it ended, and I didn't really feel interested in writing it all out. It felt like a job rather than something I wanted to do. So,
Oh,
um, if you are asking me, am I a plotter or a pantser? I am definitely a pantser.
interesting.
um, and I don't really know a lot before I start. I'll often just know the opening scene or how the two characters will meet. And for example, 99% Mine, I had a 2-book contract with HarperCollins, and it felt like having a blank check. It felt like they just said, write us a story,
Mm,
and which is an amazing privilege. And my agent suggested to me, why don't you pick out a trope that you like? And I have read every single romantic trope that there is. I used to sneak Mills and Boon novels. That's what we call them in Australia.
yes.
Over in the US, they call them Harlequins, but I used to sneak them from my grandma, who was a prolific romance reader. This is something a lot of romance writers will say, that they were really influenced by Mills and Boon, and they are usually an absolute masterclass in storytelling in a short number of words. You know,
And we used to
within
hide them too, Sally.
oh yes, definitely. Like, you know,
Yes.
we just, you know, you would find one lying around, and then you'd sort of furtively read it. They're usually a 60,000 word book, and they have to set up how they meet, what their conflict is, have a really strong beginning, middle, and end, and there is not a word to spare. So I will never hear a bad word against Mills and Boon.
No.
I think that it's such a criminally underrated type of writing and books. So I tip my hat to all of those authors who do it so well.
Yeah.
So I was reading those books. I've read every trope that there is, and some of my favorites, of course, are Forced Proximity and Hate to Love, which is the hating game. But for 99% Mine, I decided to write a brother's best friend book. So that's a trope. but I wanted to create my own take on that trope. So usually in those type of books, it's the brother saying to his best friend, Tom, stay away from my sister. And 99% mine, it is the brother saying to his sister, stay away from my best friend. So it's really fun to try to like just take a trope and then like twist it a little. And I also really wanted to give my main character Darcy the qualities that are usually reserved and gifted to the male hero in romantic straight storytelling. So that's what Darcy is. She's like a hero. She's passionate and sexual and intense and protective, and she has all of those really strong traits that usually the male character gets.
Yes.
And she sweats with lust over him, and she sacrifices her own happiness because she wants the best for him. And so the combination of twisting that trope a little bit and also giving Darcy those really strong traits made the book feel exciting for me to write and fresh for me to write. So I think, in answer to your question, I build the world by finding opportunities to do things my way and in my voice. People often tell me that my writing is quite voicey and it doesn't sound like anyone else, and there's a good reason for that. There's only one Sally Thorne, and
absolutely.
If there's anyone out there that is currently working on their draft and they think that this is a very saturated market, there's so many thousands of romance books out there, I would say that there is only one you, and only you can tell your story in your way. So it's really important.
I totally agree. There is only one Sally Thorne. Absolutely beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you.
Something that we know to be true in the library world is that readers are fiercely passionate. What's it like visiting book clubs and connecting with readers online and hearing how much your characters mean to them?
It's always very surreal. You need to imagine me. I am in Canberra, Australia, and I got my book deal in HarperCollins in New York, which was really big and frightening for me. I was imagining lots of really intimidating people in a very big New York office, and I thought, how can this possibly work? And most of my readers are in the US as well. That's where I sell the majority of my books. I have been an author on a time delay. Everything happens for me when I'm asleep. I will wake up in the morning and I'll have all my emails have come in at 2 a.m. And it wasn't really until I went over to the US last year to do my book tour for 99% Mine that it actually fully hit home what I had achieved. And that was that I had put out The Hating Game 3 years earlier, and it had made a big splash, and people knew who I was in those sort of writing circles. I remember being at KissCon in Chicago, which was like a big romance writing convention, and walking through the event and realizing that people were looking at me and saying, "There's Sally Thorne." Like, moments like that has never happened for me because I'm all the way here in Australia, asleep when anything happens. So I couldn't believe it. And it still to this day, I'm talking to someone in person at a signing and they're telling me what the book means to them. It's a real out of body experience for me because finally, at long last, I'm speaking in person to a person that has read me. This goes back as far as my fan fiction days. I never met any of those people either that loved that piece of work. So it is really humbling and really overwhelming. And the signings take a lot out of me because I'm not used to speaking in person with anyone. I sometimes will chat to my friends in real life. My mum is my biggest fan, and so she will often tell me what she liked about, a certain scene. And I'm just filing it all away, I guess. I'm just trying to continually hone the antenna of, you don't want to say what was your favorite bit because,
No.
it sounds like you're fishing for a compliment, but I also do really want to know like which bit hit differently so that I can use that in my next.
They usually come up to you and say, this was my favourite bit though, don't they? Some of
Yeah,
them do, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
some do.
Yeah.
And it's just always every single time I met anyone, it was just really exciting and a real privilege, and I felt as excited to meet them as they were to meet me. And
Yeah.
it was the whole trip over to the US. It was 10 days, and it was a new city every day. I was very jet lagged, which felt like being hungover. It felt like the worst hangover I'd ever had for 10 days straight. But I just met so many really exciting people, like excited people who um, just are the reason why writers write anything.
That's right.
So if you're listening and you are a reader and you really, really loved an author's book, it probably will make their day if you send them a message or comment on one of their social media posts saying, you loved their book and the bit that you liked. It will top them up creatively.
Sally, what can you tell us about your highly anticipated third novel, Second First Impressions? What can readers expect without giving too much away?
Sure. Well, I really enjoyed writing Second First Impressions. I did not really enjoy writing 99% Mine because there was a lot of pressure for that book. That was very hard to write. I actually compared myself to Beth from Little Women in my author's note, saying that I'd had writer's block so badly that I'd started to die. And it's true. I had a hard time with that book, and people were expecting it to be just like The Hating Game, but a second book is the author's opportunity to tell readers how things are going to be from now on. Are you going to get the same kind of book from me every time, or are you going to get something that's really different every time? So that was a piece of advice that another author gave to me. Second book is going to be the hard one, and it's going to be the one that's going to be the hardest book of your career to write, and it will also tell people this is how it's going to be. I knew that I wanted to always write really different things, and so I took a huge risk with it, and it didn't completely work out. There's still people that didn't like the book. They really wanted The Hating Game again. I think of, do you know the musician Lorde? She's like a New Zealand musician.
Yes.
Do you know her? Okay, so she had a great first album. Her first album was a huge monster smash hit album. And when her second album came out, I put it on and I thought, can't wait for more of that same sound and that I really enjoyed from that album. And her second album was completely, totally different, sounded different. And I thought, I don't know if I like this. Maybe I'll go back and I'll listen to the first album for a bit longer. And this is what happened with 99% Mine. It's the exact same thing. People thought, oh, this doesn't sound the same as The Hating Game. I'll go back to The Hating Game. So the third book is now me kind of getting out of that whole period of pressure and pre-orders and just telling a story again. It's a story that I've had in my sort of world for over 10 years. Second First Impressions is based on a story that a friend and I used to tell each other when we worked in an office. We used to tell each other, when we're really old and our husbands have died, we are going to be really rich and we're going to live together in a retirement village and we are going to hire gorgeous young men to do all of our errands. And they will do whatever we say, no matter how obscure. They'll cut up our Big Macs into little bite-sized bits and they will go to Chanel to pick up new ballet slippers for us. And this is the beautiful, rich, elderly lady lifestyle that we're going to live.
Can I join you?
Absolutely. You can take the room down the hall. So this was a story, and I said earlier that I have a lot of stories running through my life that I tell myself just for my own amusement. So this was one of them where we used to make up all these stories about what our boy would do for us when he turned up for work that day. This book is me writing down that story.
Can't wait.
It's about a girl who works at a luxury retirement villa called Providence, and she works in the front office. She's uh, currently acting as the manager of the site. Her boss is away on a cruise, and she wants everything to go really well. And up the hill, she has two of her richest residents, and they are very eccentric, and they always hire young men to be their assistants. They come down the hill and say that they've just broken the last one and she needs to get them a new one. And she says to them, look, this has to stop. You know, I really want to fix this problem before my boss comes back. Can this be your last ever boy? And they say, yep, okay, all right. This will be our last one, but we're really going to break this one in. And meanwhile, the son of the owner of the site turns up and he needs a place to crash. He also needs a job to save up something that he's working towards. And Ruthie thinks to herself, excellent, here's a job for him. Here's a job that will get him out of my hair as soon as possible because no one has ever lasted more than a week. And this is also payback because when he saw her, he had a very insulting first impression of her that hurt her feelings. So this is her payback and her revenge. So she sends him up the hill to work for these two nightmare old ladies, and to her surprise, he just won't quit no matter what they throw at him. So, and he's also extremely friendly, extremely adorable, and basically is her instant best friend. So this is a friends to lovers book. It's very funny. It's got a big age range of characters. And I think if people like The Hating Game, this one is certainly feeling back towards The Hating Game sort of vibe. It's very cozy. I would describe it in words like wallpaper and cardigans and cheese boards. There's some endangered tortoises that roam the hillsides. And it's just a story about a young woman who feels very, very old and she has to learn how to become young again.
Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait. Sally, what are you reading at the moment?
I've just finished Inner Holidays by Christina Lauren, which is a book set at Christmas time. But you could read it any old time. But I think that it will be a perfect holiday read and also a perfect present.
Nice.
Basically, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. It's a story where a girl is stuck in a time loop at Christmas. Yeah. And she has to keep beginning this Christmas gathering over and over again and build up the nerve to tell her lifelong crush how she feels about him. And I've also got the Twilight's, do you call it a sequel? Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I've got that one started, but I'm finding it, maybe it's sort of 10 years too late for me. I've already explained that I was obsessed with Twilight. And had she finished Midnight Sun 10 years ago when she intended to, maybe it would have hit a bit different. So I'm trying to get into that one. But I also have to admit that when I am working on a book, I often don't do a lot of reading because you're reading someone else's final product. It's always really good. And then you look back at your draft and you think, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I can't do this.
That's interesting. No, an author's never said that to me. That's quite interesting. Like you try to sort of...
maybe they're better than me, or maybe they're lying.
No. I guess you can kind of get distracted, can't you, doing that reading? Yeah, I guess.
I'm a beginner too, you know, like I'm only just having my third book out. So I need to manage myself between, you know, how I feel about myself and my writing, and then try to separate that out from how I feel about when I read someone else's writing.
I wouldn't call you a beginner, Sally, really. And I think that your listeners wouldn't call you a beginner either.
Well, it's only been sort of 5 years that I've completely changed my entire life with my writing. Before this, I worked in an office in a public service job, and I hated my life. I absolutely hated it. Not the people, you always find good people wherever you go, whichever job you have, but I was miserable. I lived for Friday night, and from Monday morning until Friday afternoon, I was wishing my life away. And I could never have imagined that I would completely change my own life just by writing The Hating Game, which was a gift for a friend for her birthday.
Yeah, I read that.
Wasn't
Yes.
written.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't written to publish it. I never intended on publishing it. It was written in a fan fiction-y kind of way, as in a free thing that had no expectations
And she
on it.
pushed you to publish it.
She just said to me, "This is really good. Would you I think you should consider.
Yeah.
I think you should consider what you want to do with this."
Yeah.
And I just worked on it whenever I felt like it for the next 18 months, afternoons, when I felt like it, which might have been one Sunday out of every 4. And from there, passing it on to Christina and Lauren's agent, then getting the call from my agent in LA saying, "Are you considering any other representation?" I'm thinking, no, I'm sitting here in my room in Canberra, Australia. So it's just really interesting how each little step that you take can build up into a bigger picture. And I saved myself. From wishing my life away. So good job, Sally.
Very good job. Sally, we've had some very exciting news last week that the film adaptation of The Hating Game will begin shooting on November 21st. What can you tell us about the project, and how does it feel knowing that your creation is being adapted for the screen?
Well, yes, it's really exciting, obviously. I always have had no expectations of my book. When the book came out, I didn't do any particular promotion of it or anything like that. I thought if it's a good book, people will tell their friends. And when the film option sold, I was told, just take it for what it is. The option's sold, and that means maybe something will happen with it in the future, maybe not. Just take it as a good little piece of news and don't think about it anymore. So I did. But then they developed a screenplay for it, and it's I think that it's a really good book for a movie because so much of it is taking place just in one room. That's really easy to do.
Yeah.
It's almost like a play.
Yeah.
And relying really heavily on that backwards and forwards dialogue. So the project, so the screenplay was written by Christina Mengert, and I got some input into it. I didn't expect that I would. They sent me the script and said, "What do you think about it?" And I read it and I thought it was great. And I tweaked a few little bits, and I've had another chance to make input a couple of weeks ago. And how does it feel knowing that it is being adapted to the screen? It feels like an immense honor and a privilege to be able to spark an entirely new project. This movie, people say to me all the time, "Are you afraid? Are you worried that they can screw it up?" I'm not, because, well, I've read the screenplay and I think it's really good. But also, this is a new thing. This is a different thing. And it is giving jobs to a lot of people who this is their dream and this is their passion. And, everyone from the actors to the cast, like the crew, they're all going to be working on a project that they're going to be really excited about. So it's a privilege to be a starting off point that gives people jobs and helps them to live their dream.
And I know someone, and they asked you whether the elevator scene was going to be in the movie. And you replied back and you said, "Yes, it is."
Yes, that's right. I do get asked a lot about that scene, which is very funny to me because I even say in the book that there's been like a million kisses in elevators in books and movies. It goes to show that you shouldn't be too afraid to do something your way, even if you think it's been done a lot of times before, because, that was my version of a kiss in an elevator, and people still bring it up to me.
Yes, I did too.
Yes, so yes, that is in the movie script. Don't worry, guys. I got you.
All right. Thank you, Sally, for your time and for a wonderful chat. We wish you all the best with your new book, Second First Impressions, and with all future publications. Sally's books are available at any of our Inner West libraries, ready for you to borrow. Log on to our catalogue and place a reservation at any time. If you would like to purchase any of Sally's books, please visit your favourite independent bookstore, online or in person. Bye, everyone, and thank you for listening. And look out for upcoming digital content through the Inner West Library, What's On, and social media channels.